Hello everyone, and welcome back to my series of explaining every Pokemon's type. Telling everyone why, if a Pokemon truly should have been a certain type, it would have been. I've explained why each of the original 151 is the type that it is, so let's continue with Gen 2! Just like before, and from now on, starters are grass, fire, and water for game balancing purposes. But what else is there to uncover? Well, they're all monotype this time. Likely due to the fact there's not really any reasoning for any other type to apply. Some say Feraligatr should have been fighting, but it's a goofy guy. Bulkiness doesn't necessarily equal fighting, neither does being a crocodile or alligator. It's not very vicious looking, but can mess you up if need be. Like most fully evolved Mon. Being a croc/gator makes water make sense though. The Cyndaquil line seemed to be fiery rodents culminating in a very angry badger. Sometimes it do be as simple as an animal with fire on it. I might as well mention now that I'll cover regional forms and any other type changing forms in their own videos, or along with the region they came in. As for the Chikorita line, it's also just as simple as dinosaur plus plant. The plant does change throughout the line, but that alone justifies it being grass type. If you're enjoying this video so far, why not like, comment and subscribe, and make sure to check out the links in the description. Why not consider being a patron or member today? You'll get cool rewards such as seeing my videos early and seeing progress on my Fakemon videos. Sentret is just a flying squirrel, and Furret is just a ferret. Sentret doesn't also have flying because normal flying to normal would feel like a regression. Sure, other monotype Mon in this gen evolved from a dual type, but none were normal. Flying adds too much flavour, so if it was removed, it would sort of feel like a regression, wouldn't it? Speaking of, all these Mon are flying type due to the fact they can fly, as they are birds. They are also normal type due to the fact they're just birds, since normal is often used as the regular animal type. That said, I will elaborate on Togetic when I get to Togepi. The Ledybug line are ladybugs, which are bugs that can fly. The Spinarak line are spiders, which are associated with insects enough to justify the bug type, some species of which are venomous, so poison type. Now that I've gotten to Crobat, I might as well lump all of the cross-generational evolutions or pre-evolutions into this section. Well, the ones that share their types with their pre-evolved or evolved forms respectively. These would be for the same reasons I mentioned last video. Go check that out if you haven't already. By the way, any exceptions to this, or if they do change type combo later on, will come up later, specifically when I get to them in their Natdex order. The Chinchou line are based on anglerfish, a deep sea creature, hence water type, and the bioluminescent lure acting as a lantern, and lanterns can be electric in nature. Electric also sometimes acts as a sort of light type, which will come up again later. The Togepi line is based on a hatchling, which becomes a bird which flies, so normal to normal flying does make sense, since what it's based on doesn't really have any other type that can be ascribed to it. But the normal typing in the whole line got changed to fairy, due to its inspiration possibly being the Dokkaebi from Korean folklore. Please forgive me for any pronunciation I get wrong. This is due to it being the personification of luck. Unlike Chansey, this line represents luck more magically, which tends to be represented as an actual force, which is what fairy magic is, or as divine intervention. Angels make sense to be fairy type, and Togepi's evolutions do seem to be pretty angelic. The Natu line visually references Native American totems and Kachina, which are spiritual beings. Combine that with practicing Aztec and Mayan sun gazing, then the type that totally represents this line the best out of the 17 available is Psychic. Flying also makes sense since it's a bird that can fly. The Mareep line are sheep. Sheep are covered in wool, which build up static electricity. Ampharos also has strong ties to lighthouses, being tall, stripy, and lighting up the Olivine City Lighthouse. Its category is the light Pokemon, like with Lantern. And I mentioned earlier that Electric is a type that acts as a sort of light type. All of these reasons make Electric pretty fitting. Blossom is grass type, because it's a plant that evolves from Gloom, another plant that is grass type. Upon evolution, it does lose the poison type, probably due to the fact that it's all beautiful and fragrant now, so poison doesn't quite work. I think it's just meant to be a flower now. The Marrow line is based on flotation devices which float on water, so water type. They gained the fairy type possibly due to the idea that it's helpful, almost like it's a fairy godmother saving you from drowning, since it's a flotation device. Sudowoodo is rock type, perhaps due to being based on petrified wood, which is essentially a plant that's become a fossil, which is made up of minerals, so rock. although its design concept of being a mimic for the tree that usually gets cut with the HM doesn't play into the rock type. It explains why it isn't grass type, since it isn't a plant, it's just pretending, hence the name being Pseudo-Wudo. It's not quite wood, pseudo-wood. You get it. The Hoppipine are based on dandelions, a plant, hence grass, which are known for their seeds which glide through the air, which can be carried long distances in the wind, which can be interpreted as flight, hence flying. Aepom is a monkey with a hand instead of a prehensile tail. Normal works as the regular animal type, plus there isn't really a hand type out of the other 16 types, so mono-normal it is. The Sunkern line is a sunflower seed which evolves into a sunflower, a life cycle of a specific plant and nothing more. Grass. People wonder why it's not fire type, and to that I say, where is the fire here? If you're on about connections to the sun, then remember that sun wasn't really considered a fire type property until Gen 3 when weather was introduced. A fire type sunflower mon could make sense. It's just that this one wasn't depicted with fire in mind. It's just a sunflower with a face, so it's just a plant with a face. Monograss is fine. Yanma is a dragonfly, a bug that can fly. There's debate about this one and how it should be a dragon type due to the fact that dragonflies are called dragonflies. From what I can gather, there's not really any dragon association with the animal in Japan, and it seems to just be the animal, which is a bug that can fly, so bug flying. The Whoopoo are based on salamanders and axolotls, many of whom live in muddy swamps. Mud is a combination of water and earth, which would explain the water type and the ground type. Espeon appears to be based on various mystical and magical cat yokai with a third eye, which is very spiritual. In a way, it's the magic evolution, and Psychic is the magic type. As for Umbreon, it was originally going to be poison. They certainly felt like having some malevolent powers in this evolution, but since the Dark type debuted in the same game, and one of its main features is its effectiveness against Psychic, and couple that with the day and night mechanic, with Espeon very much already feeling perfect to represent the day, even being called the Sun Pokemon, and night being associated with darkness, it just made sense to make Umbreon a Dark type. Murkrow is a crow that looks like it's wearing a witch's hat, since they're associated, a witch's familiar and all that. Crows are also a bad omen, all of which points to dark being the right type for it. Crows can also fly, cause they are birds, so flying. Mischievous is a floating head spirit, which multiple mythologies have as creatures. Ghost makes sense due to how a lot of these creatures are supernatural or have supernatural abilities, and how 100% of people whose head is detached from their bodies are in fact dead. Unknown is Psychic, less because of its inspiration, but more because of its behaviour. They are based on the alphabet, as well as two forms introduced in Gen 3 based on a question mark and exclamation mark. They don't change type. This is referenced in how a single Unknown can't do much, but can do many things as a group, much like individual letters being meaningless until you put them together. This behaviour is kind of like a hive mind, which is the reason the Execute line was Psychic, so this reasoning fits Unknown as well. Wobbuffet? Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe, since it's a punching bag, it's the personification of karma, which is a Buddhist belief. Anything you do against it will bounce back and affect you after all. Karma seems to be this psychic force which can always tell what you've done, dictating the future, which is typically depicted as something psychics do. Buddhism is big in Japan after all. Wobbuffet appears not to be the main body receiving attacks, but the black blob controlling the punching bag, perhaps telekinetically. Girafarig was originally meant to be dark normal, suggesting duality between good and evil, with that duality being referenced in its name being a palindrome. But the final version's duality now seems to be between a regular animal and a magical creature. A Kirin is a mythical creature that can appear at the imminent passing of a sage. However, Kirin is also the Japanese word for giraffe, which is a regular creature. Since the main head is a giraffe, it's primarily normal type, and because of its mystical dual nature, it is also part psychic type. The Pineco line is bug type because it is a bagworm, who can look like pine cones, but they're not, so they're not grass. It also looks and acts like a grenade, since it can explode, which doesn't affect its typing, but means that its evolution, Forretress, is steel type since it develops on this weaponry theme by bringing in gun turrets, bombs, cannons and cannonballs, and fortresses as inspiration, which are all mostly made from metal. Dunsparce is based on the Tsuchinoko, a snake-like cryptid from Japanese folklore. It's basically just a fat snake. Dunsparce's only real feature is that it's a fat snake, and not a very notable one otherwise. It has no elemental typing, plus it has other non-snake features. It's a variety of animals, but largely just a snake. Normal works well. Gligar is partially inspired by scorpions, which like to burrow in the ground, and bats, which can fly, although Gligar can only glide instead of fly. That's flying enough. Steelix was sort of marketed as the poster child for this new discovery of the Steel type, and is the ace of the Steel Gym Leader, almost to mirror how Onix was the ace of the first Gym Leader. Jasmine's ace before Steelix was apparently Onix. Since Onix was made of hard material, it made sense to make it even harder, Steel. Also, it's ground type for the same reason Onix was. The Snubbull line was originally normal, likely because it is a dog. It became fairy in Gen 6 since it was categorized as the fairy Pokemon, which is likely due to being based on many fantasy creatures, possibly including the Kushi, which is a Scottish fairy dog myth. I don't see how it really resembles it, so maybe it's just a pun. This also suggests that since there wasn't a fairy type in Gen 2, normal fit best. You could argue that the magical aspect should have made it psychic to begin with, but it's basically a regular dog that's a fairy, so normal made sense until fairy was introduced. Quillfish is based on a pufferfish, which lives in water. Most pufferfish are poisonous, so it is poison type. Scizor is still a mantis, like Scyther, so it is bug type. It is now covered in metal, so is steel type now. Shuckle is the mold Pokemon, so maybe based on some kind of infectious mold, hence the bug type? I think it's more likely based on a barnacle, since it's named after one in Japanese, and after them generally in English. Barnacles are arthropods, which tend to be bug-type. Their exoskeletons and tendency to cling onto rocks makes rock make sense. Heracross is a Japanese rhinoceros beetle, a bug. They are known for their strength in insect fighting, hence the fighting type. Sneasel is a black cat, which is typically seen as a bad omen. It is also based on the yokai Kamaitachi, which appear as weasel demons with sickles on their front paws. All of this malevolence makes dark make sense. The Kamaitachi also appeared in colder weather, hence Sneasel's ice type. The Teddiursa line is just a bear, with its design being a fun play on sun bears specifically, but replacing the sun with the moon. But they are just bears, so normal. The Slugma line is fire type because they're based on magma and lava, which are very hot. Magcargo adds the rock type since its shell is cooled lava, which is what rock is. The Swinub line lives in colder habitats, which explains its ice type, which the line's design seems to reference also. However, they are primarily based on boars, which stereotypically love mud, hence its ground type. Corsola is coral, an organism which lives in water and is very rock-like in nature. The Remoraid line are aquatic creatures that act like weapons and artillery, but are essentially just aquatic creatures, so water. Delibird is based on the penguin, which are famous for living in colder climates, and Santa, who is a popular character in the Northern Hemisphere when celebrating Christmas, which occurs in winter, which is also cold. So ice type makes sense. Despite penguins being flightless, birds can still fly, I guess? And since Santa flies in his magical sleigh, it makes sense that Delibird does too, but not in a sleigh. Hence its flying type. Mantine or Mantine, either way makes sense, I don't know how to pronounce this one, is a manta ray, which lives in the water. Manta rays are in the Mobula genus, many species of which are known as flying rays. Skarmory is a crane made of swords, which appears to be a pun on the fact that the Japanese word for paper cranes is very similar to the word for sword. Swords are made from metal, so steel type, and real cranes can fly, so flying type. The Houndour line is based on black dogs and hellhounds, which are omens of death. And Dark seems to be the omen type, as we've discussed. It is fire due to depictions of hell being fiery, and Kerberos from Greek mythology is another dog, associated with death, existing in the underworld and all, and also being associated with fire. Yes, I called him Kerberos and not Cerberus, because I'm talking about the myth and not the Disney character. Kingdra is a water type, for the same reasons as Seadra. It is now a dragon type due to the Japanese word for seahorse meaning dragon's child. The Phampi line is based on elephants who like to play in the mud, but also have a tire motif, and tires always stick to the ground, hence the ground typing. Stantler is just a weird looking cartoon deer, and Pokemon that are just mammals are usually normal. Smeargle is, again, another mammal, another regular mammal. It's dog, but it's also a painter, and a regular mammal that is a painter. Then there's no painter type, so it's normal, since normal is a type that fits typeless concepts as well. my god, I've got... There's 3 regular mammals in a row. It's just a cow. Miltank is just a cow. The whole point is that it's a cow, nothing more. It's normal type, end of. And it's not fairy type, because why? It's just, not everything pink has to be fairy type. The legendary beasts are elemental cats, with more ambiguous features as well. Their lore states that Ho-Oh resurrected 3 Pokemon, who perished in the Burnt Tower, and these Pokemon are now Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. Their typings reflect the lightning that struck the tower, that started the fire that burned it down, the fire itself, and the rain which put the fire out, respectively. The Larvitar line is rock-ground, since it lives in the caves on Mount Silver, and most Pokemon that live in caves tend to relate to the minerals in the cave, and that's a mixture of rock and earth in Mount Silver's case. It also looks like it has a vaguely tough skin, so essentially it's the reasons that all the other rock-ground types have. When Pupitar evolves into Tyranitar, the ground typing is replaced by Dark. It is based on Godzilla, which has tough skin and hard spikes. This translates into its design in a way that makes Tyranitar known as the armor Pokemon. This toughness means rock is still leaned into and kept. As for the introduction of Dark, Godzilla is a villainous character, which is leaned into a lot with Tyranitar, to the point where its Japanese name is a portmanteau of the Japanese words for barbarian and hated, as well as the suffix Saurus, but that's less important. This savagery and lack of morality makes Dark work in my opinion. Lugia is an interesting one. Despite being referred to as the guardian of the seas, it's not water type. Fans wondered why. This series is about giving any possible or definitive reason, regardless of how good you or I think that reason is. In a Nintendo Dream interview in 2009, the director of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Shigeki Morimoto, stated that the original intention was to make Lugia a water type, but Psychic was chosen instead, since it's a powerful legendary Pokemon. Also, it was designed for the movie, in which it was shown using psychic powers, so it's not as if Psychic doesn't make sense. Yes, it has waterbending powers too, but that could just be telekinesis. I personally feel like if a Pokemon should have been a certain type, it would have been. The creators of Lugia decided its power was more defining than its ties to the ocean, so picked a type fit for a legendary to suit it. They felt it was necessary. Disagree all you want, but it is the definitive reason. The flying type comes in due to the fact that it's loosely based on birds, as well as Ryujin, which is a dragon that is also the Shinto god of the sea, and Japanese dragons can fly, see Gyarados for that. In the movie it was also seen as the sort of god of the legendary birds from Kanto, and said birds are all flying type. It would make sense that if it has kinship with those birds, it would share the type of those birds, which is flying. Also, it can fly. Ho-Oh is a phoenix, specifically Feng Kuang from Chinese myth. Phoenixes are associated with fire and are birds which can fly. And finally, Celebi is nature incarnate, and since it lives in a forest, it made sense to make it look like a plant bulb too. Grass works for sure. Psychic is the magic type, at least it was circa Gen 2. It's a magical nature spirit. Perhaps if it was introduced in Gen 6 or later, it could have been Grass Fairy instead, but Pokemon has yet to replace a Pokemon's existing type with another unless of its normal being replaced with Fairy, a monotype gaining another, or via an alternate form. None of which apply to Celebi, so Grass Psychic it remains. And that is all the Pokemon introduced in Gold and Silver. Next up is the Hoenn Dex. Like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.